Good afternoon, and it is a beautiful day today. So, today is going to be part 2 of the video of yesterday. So just a recap of what I was discussing yesterday. I was talking about utopia and dystopia and how socialism was not founded by Marx. It was predated him. And in fact, Karl Marx critiqued the utopia of socialism because they had no practical application. It's all dreamlike. It's like the best way to describe it was, it's good to have a dream, but if you don't put any step towards it, and actual put your walk the walk, and actually have some sort of plan to reach it, your dream will mean absolutely nothing. It's just a dream. And this is where, and that is how that was the biggest involvement that Karl Marx did. And then he wrote Das Kapital, and then critiqued the problem with capitalism. He basically really rooted the socialist movement from theoretical into practical. And at that, there was other there's like other kinds of socialism that started to emerge, like the anarchists, under like Buchanan. One of the biggest work that he wrote is called The Conquest of Bread. And in it, the biggest idea that he talks about is how, like, the idea that property is theft. Like, one of the things that anarchists will discuss a lot is how property is theft. And why they argue for that reason is the fact that the capitalist system creates monopolies. Like, you create scarce resources. As soon as you create the concept of property, you are literally creating the onset of monopolies. And yesterday I used the example of land, how there's so much land that exists, and it's impossible to have everyone owns a piece of land. It's just a matter of time. There's only one person who owns everything. And now today you have all kinds of billionaires buying acres upon thousands of acres. Well, they dictate what goes on their land, in those lands. But let's say, but what about other? And that's the easiest way to kind of like highlight the problem of property. But let's say, but one important argument that the people are pro-capitalism. They go on and say the free market will solve every issue. If you just deregulate and just let the free market, or like the invisible hand of the market, which they really bastardize what Adam Smith was really talking about, the invisible hand invisible hand of the market. It had nothing to do with what they understand the concept of invisible hand of market. Like, for them, they think that just letting the free market the competition will just simply regulate itself out. That had nothing to do with what Adam Smith was really talking about. What he viewed of what person's self-determination. And you can say that what he was talking about was twofold. Yes, everyone has their own desire to do what is right. They have their own personal desire to achieve things. Like what, and when a person do like a baker, the baker is interested to make the bread, and other people doesn't have that interest. Other people will be more interested to work in restaurant, and as a basically cooperating with each other, that the market kind of like becomes unified. But it does not mean that the owner of the business, that you should not have the free market, just let it be without regulation. That is something that he never once argued. Like, for example, the one thing that he absolutely hated is landlords. He just thought landlords as absolutely evil scum of the society, that they should not exist. He absolutely hated the like a lot of times people would say, but what about the poor landlords? What about the people who own homes? If you don't pay your rent, you won't be able to afford it. Yeah, but yet at the same time they're going to quote Adam Smith about the free market. Yeah, the same guy absolutely hated landlords. He just views them as a little thief to try to jack up the prices to make themselves richer. But they're never going to talk about that, do they? They never talk about how Adam Smith viewed a belief in a libertarian value with what Karl Marx used in his Das Kapital, where he believed that all wealth is generated from the people, from the worker. It is the people who produce all wealth. It is not a small minority of elites that decides what to produce. That are the general, what today's term, or the job creator. He will have hated that idea, because it's the exact same thing of what the feudal landlords was trying to argue. That is basically the people, the landlord, the people who owns the property, are the one who makes the value of goods. And one of the thing that he talks about is how the invention of the Industrial Revolution, where before you needed to have one person to make all the components of a nail. But if you basically like divide the labor, you can have one person dealing with the pin or the specific part of the nail, the manufacturer, and as a whole, you can produce more goods at a much rapid rate. In other words, it's the worker who does all the wealth generation. And another thing that these people will never talk about is how what others will ultimately want is to produce wealth that benefits everyone, not a small minority, but everyone. And what he fundamentally believes is that everyone deserves to have food and shelter. One argument to truly highlight this, and it's another thing that all those people like Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell and all of those people did never discuss, is even though they praise Adam Smith as the greatest thinker, as the father of capitalism, it's the fact that he thought that a slave, an actual, like somebody who is living under chattel slavery, he was better off than a seasonal worker. Why is he making this argument? Because at the very least, a slave, the slave master had to provide food and shelter. And that's the idea. Like you're thinking like to ourselves, but slavery is immoral, it's wrong, and these people were treated like inhuman. Yet, he still argued that we were still better off rather than a seasonal worker. Because a seasonal worker, in the off-season, a business owner had no responsibility to provide food and shelter, like money to the worker. But for a slave, he did. And that's one thing I find interesting, that we usually think how horrible the condition they live under, the slaves. But the thing is, for half of the year, they just had to work in the fields. The other half over the winter, they don't. But the slave master said how to provide food and shelter in an off season. And yet, under capitalism, a worker without a welfare or EI or anything like that, there is no initiative for a business owner to pay food and shelter to the worker. And that is actually very, very true. Because I work in many seasonal jobs. Where I will work at the my last seasonal job was working at the fish plant, where I worked from May till December. Sure, during that time, I had to work, and then you pay me and all that. But once the season is over, if I didn't have unemployment insurance, I will have no income over the winter. Yet, under slavery, they still had to provide. Another thing that I found interesting was a peasant on a medieval time. They had more free time than they have under capitalism. Because they had festival, they have months off, they had all kinds of ability to enjoy themselves. They were not forced to always work all year round. And I have seen some argument, but that doesn't really highlight the fact that some of them still had to take care of animals over the winter, milk them and that kind of thing. Like, yeah, well, guess what? There's still a lot less work than what they had to do in their on season. They have to plow, they have to harvest, they didn't have to do any of that sort. So they still have a lot more free time than they have under capitalism. Under capitalism, employers don't want to give you free time. Like here in North America, having 2 weeks vacation is the norm. I know in Europe, they view that as so backward because they get at least a month off in many of those places. They had a lot more free time in their vacation, which is all paid and all that, in Europe than they have in North America. In the US, it's even worse. It's not even mandated by the government to give people vacation. In fact, in a lot of places, they don't even give you sick leave for the most ridiculous concept that I've seen is a mother giving birth to a new child. Great, back to work tomorrow. I don't care if you just have a baby. I want you to make you money. If you don't come back to work, you're fired. And this entire topic leads to my point of individual freedom, negative freedom, and the problem with it. Going back to my critique, what Marxism was really doing, what Marx and socialism, why a Marxist or a socialist absolutely hate capitalism. And this all comes back to the problem of property. Right of life, right of liberty is great. The problem is property. Because under the capitalist system, the accumulation of capital is more important than anything else. Because if you stop producing capital, then the system crashes. It cannot sustain itself if it stops producing. It has to be in motion. It will always have to produce goods. It always has to buy and sell services. It always have to do things. And of course, capitalism also has a tendency to self-destruct. And on average, every 4 to 8 years, there's a market crash. It is true for everywhere that capitalism has settled. Not a single person, president, not a single one, like not a president, prime minister, leader, thinker, or pro-capitalism was ever able to solve this problem. And that all led to the whole Great Depression in the 30s. And there's also another one that happens in the 80s, and another one that has happened in the 2008 crash. Then the virus pandemic. The idea that we have a virus spreading across the globe, you had to stop the flow of goods, to really had to control. You can't have business shut down. It literally, basically, is anathema to capitalism, because once you have that, the system crashes. They're not able to handle it. So this is where you have all the pro-capitalism guys like, we have to get the market going again. We cannot just sit idle. Open up the market. We need to open up the market because we need to buy and sell goods. As long as you have you have those barriers, the market is not the market isn't happening. And the idea that it was so authoritarian of those merely, oh, you have to wear a mask, you need to have a vaccine, in order to have to work and all that. It's so authoritarian, it's just Marxism is going to ruin the country. For fuck's sake, that is nothing compared to some previous pandemic response that the government had on the people. Like, I am not going to delve into COVID right now. I can easily do, but I have a specific video that I'm going to be dealing with all of that, COVID and all that. I'm going to focus on what I was talking about. So, rear this all back to what I was saying between Karl Marx and the anarchists. The issue is that a capitalist only cares for two things ultimately. One, the business owner can do whatever they want without consequence, and an individual, they can do whatever they want without consequence. This is why they want to crush any unions, labor movement, because it's all focused on the entrepreneur, because he's the one who generates the wealth. He's the one who ultimately has the right to run things, the right to decide what, where, how, why, and when to do things. They are the one who you should not impede. They're the wealth creator, the jobs creator. So you should not impede their freedom. But we're not going to talk if that person creates problem. And then another thing, another thing that is important to recognize is that people like Russell Brand and Ben Shapiro, Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, all try to attack what they don't like. If you actually listen to what they have to say, and I'm going to use, and this is what I'm going to say regarding the COVID. And this is basically, because this is a perfect example. I watched a video about Russell Brand talking about, but during the pandemic, Pfizer got rich on the vaccine. Pfizer has board members on the FDA. The Pfizer basically monopolize the vaccine. Notice what these people actually don't say. And in my head, I'm just watching this and I'm like, wow, such an insightful view. It's not like what the entire capitalist system is about. These people do one thing, at the same breath they're going to say that, to the same breath they will say that the government needs to deregulate the business. They need to let the business owner do whatever they want. The government should not impede on their decision. And we should abolish unions. We should deregulate unions. The unions should not have dues. Because unions, dues gives them unions too much power to make powers in government. Okay. What about the capitalists that you do like? Well, you don't actually argue against them. Like, for example, big oil. Like tobacco. Like grocery stores. Like Coca-Cola. Like the ones who actually destroy this planet. Beep! 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 Silence. And if you try to regulate them, you are totalitarian or authoritarian. You should not do this. China is totalitarian or dictatorship because they control the businesses Or if a business is taking over their bounds, they execute them. That is dictatorship. That is evil. You should not do this. Or you want to regulate the oil business, we should abolish. No. You can't do that. You don't need to let the free market decide. Hypocrisy. That's what I say. Show me any of these people actually cares for the worker. No, they don't. What they care is ability to buy goods and services without problem, without dealing any systemic problem. You want to actually deal with Pfizer? Great. I know. I hate Pfizer too. It's a monopoly. Of course I hate them. You know what you want to do to actually abolish a monopoly? Oh, there's something called antitrust laws. Reinforce it. Use it. Does government overreach? You can't do that. Oh, I can't have free speech on social media or on a Facebook or whatnot. They are totalitarian. They are not allowing to have free speech. Well, guess what? That is your freaking ideology. Because you want to say that we cannot regulate a business. And then you come and say that this business you don't like, the totalitarian, that is government overreach or whatnot, when you are the one who created this situation with the establishment of neoliberalism. This is the contradiction that exists between the two kinds of freedom that talk about for a right winger. They don't actually care for the people. They pretend that they do. Ultimately, they only care for their own selfish greed and need. It's their own selfish interest. And they don't care for the people at the bottom. They really don't. These people think that if you have wealth, $1 billion, you are successful. The more money that you have, the more successful that you have. If you're a billionaire, you have worked hard to get that $1 billion. No. Every single billionaires are parasites. Why are they parasites? Because they extract values from every other people's work to achieve their wealth. Let's take Elon Musk. He has multiple companies where you have multiple people inside those companies who made the invention, who produce the goods, the services, all the things that runs the company. He just gets all the credit for. Hence, a parasite. And he didn't even created this company. He just bought them out. And that is ultimately what negative liberty, if you just solely focus on negative liberty, is about. Now let's discuss if you deny negative liberty and you're only going to focus on positive liberty, which is what the Marxists going to argue. And this is the reason why I am not a Marxist. They are only going to focus on the collective good. What is good for everyone? Like free healthcare, abortion, that kind of thing. Like you should centralize that power. And you really get that with Lenin. And Marx is kind of like, yes, he was like very pro like centralized government, and he was the first one. Like when he first wrote the Communist Manifesto, a lot of things that he wrote was things that never existed before, like national banks, like progressive taxation, that is the two biggest things that I had. Before central bank existed, the market basically went up and down. That the economic growth there's going to be a time of inflation and it will be a time of deflation. And it's always that pattern. Ever since the central bank occurred, it's just been constant inflation. But up to the 1980s, generally speaking, real wage and inflation were like matching. Like it was kind of like on par. It's like they were kind of counteract each other. Progressive taxation was one of the biggest change that literally affected the lives of people. Basically saying that the higher your income, the more in taxes you should pay. And FDR really took that idea to a whole new level, where there was something like, after so much money, like I forget it was the amount on the top of my head right now, but after so much money, you're going to have a 90% wealth tax. Now, of course, you can do certain things that will help reduce your tax bracket, which is usually about that the entrepreneur had to focus on improvement on their company, development of the company and all that. Which led, which basically the effective tax rate was like 60% at the end. But the fact that they get tax breaks depending on how they actually do it. And it basically it had to be investment in their own company to actually help the lives of the worker. But of course, the capitalists really didn't like that, and I'm going to stop right there, because then we started a whole new topic, but it's going to be important later. I just want to bring that out, that kind of idea is something that Marx took, and it was successful. Very, 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 very successful. And at that time, it was completely revolutionary. Like, one of the things that he fought during his time was the worker having more free time. Like, instead of working 60 hours days, they were working 14 hours days. And so he's basically, and anyways. But of course, capitalists did not want that, because it's infringing on their own freedom, because they wanted to make as much money as possible. And that is still true to this day. So, going back to positive liberty. Positive liberty will be like, yeah, we're going to give you free health care, we're going to do all of this, but we're going to deny negative liberty. Because, and the anarchists will say, you're correct about the positive liberties, but you're incorrect on dealing the negative liberty. You have to consider the liberty, the individual liberty of people. You can't just go from one end of the spectrum to the other, because it's going to cause problem. And if you want to centralize everything, it's going to have a new class of elite. Like one way they often describe is state capitalism, where you're basically, instead you have the capitalists as the owners of the means of production. You're now transferred to the state as the owner of the means of production. When you let it to the state to decide those things. And that really debate come to a huge halt by the end of the 19th century, where there was this huge split in the Communist International between the anarchists and the Marxists, and then that split was never mended ever since. Now, out of that, things gets even more interesting. Now that the Marx, that is split, and the thing is that the anarchists will argue that the way that they want to achieve communism, and keep in mind, communism, and this is something that all socialists agrees, they want a stateless, classless, and moneyless society. It's the way how you achieve it that we disagree. And the critique that the Marxists had towards the anarchists is like, but you don't understand authority. Like, if you have, and this is what the whole short essay from Engels comes into play, on authority, where it basically talks about it like, yeah, well, guess what? You still going to need some leadership to lead people, and you can't always just be decentralized because of the individual can't always make solution. You have to work together, and cooperatively to make decisions and all that. And ultimately, you're going to have a leader who's going to dictate the will of everybody else. It's like they're talking about a top-down hierarchy type of deal. And there's a lot of times, it will come down to a debate between a top-down hierarchy or bottom-up hierarchy. It really comes down to the whole debate. Like, think about a business. It's a top-down hierarchy. But a bottom hierarchy will mean that you elect your leader, and the leader will be accountable to the worker. And in another case, it will say you completely misunderstand what we're talking about, because yes, everyone is an individual, but we choose to cooperate with each other to make a collective good. But we also refer to experts. The person who is an expert at making shoes, we're going to refer to the theory of the shoemaker on how to decide things. And the conquest of bread is really like one of the core fundamental of anarchism, of philosophy. It was written by Benjamin Buchanan. And if you actually read that, and they view themselves as libertarian. They're the original libertarian. Now you can call that a libertarian socialist or anarchist. They were the one who basically said, you know, all the technology that we ever have is based on the works of previous person, and is always a cooperation with everyone. So it's basically through cooperation that you develop technology. One of the biggest thing, the biggest argument they're going to hear from an anarchist, the law of the jungle is competition. The law of civilization is cooperation. It doesn't mean that you have just some friendly competition. It's always good. But if you literally just compete, you're going to self-destruct. And going back to the free market. The free market, as I keep saying, is going to self-destruct because of the whole recession and depression, all of that. It always happens, and millions of people goes on a job and all of that every 4 to 8 years, because it's all competition. And one of the things about the competition is, if you have perfect competition, a perfect market, it's still going to end up to be a monopoly. You're still going to have a monopolies. Why? Let's say you have 10 business. Everyone competing against each other, but for whatever reason, one of those business close up. Now, the wealth of that one business being closed up is now being absorbed by the other business. Now they have more wealth. And if they have more wealth, they're going to invest that wealth to get more capital. And as that process continues, because the free market is always going to lead to business shutting down, eventually all that wealth that those 10 business have will be only in the hands of one or a couple. And because as they grow bigger, guess what? Let's say one business gets a lot more richer. Great, I'm gonna go and buy out of your business. Sure, I will buy you. Guess what? You have no more power over the market. Hence creating a monopoly. We see that happening all the bloody time. Like, let's discuss Disney for example. They're a monopoly now. But because they keep buying out other franchise. They have like Star Wars, Marvel, Disney. They have, they even have like the Alien franchise in, they're a part of them. So again, demonstrating how wealth gets concentrated into fewer and fewer hands. And the thing is about these monopolies, guess what? Once they have more wealth, they're going to try to lobby the government to make laws that benefits them. Oh, wait. That's the result of Big Pharma having boards of members in the FDA. Wow. The self-interest of a company decided, wait, in order to benefit myself, I have to by government installing my people to a certain position of power, so on and so forth. Hence, once again, the state and capitalism goes hand to hand. Under Marx's term, is called the superstructure. The superstructure is all the different structures, institutional structures that exist in a society that are designed to support the capitalists. And the capitalists will use those superstructure to benefit them. Because ultimately, remember, under negative liberty, the concept for a right-winger, the ability for a capitalist to do whatever they want without consequence. And you should not regulate them. Guess what? They're going to use a part of the state to benefit them because, guess what? Because ultimately, what they want is to control the market. The free market does not exist. It is a myth. Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Good with yourself.
Good, thanks.
Even archaeologists actually literally have shown that markets never existed until the foundation of states. And I can, on another day, I'll be delving into that topic. But just for now, this is all like what all socialist critique is. Like, these are all things that capitalism create. Like whether an anarchist or a Marxist, whether you're Marxist or any socialist, will always agree upon. This is why, coming back, why an anarchist would say that property is theft. Because you are literally monopolizing the land, and in order to reinforce property right, you need to have the state to reinforce those rules. So yeah. And as I was saying about the difference between an anarchist and a communist, the communist is going to say, okay, we're going to make the state, but with the intention to ultimately to have it abolished. We need a state now, but in the long term, and we're going to try to develop the economy to such a point that the state is not going to be needed. And Lenin is going to introduce the concept of the withering of the state. Now, I'm going to discuss more that topic in my next video where I am going to discuss what happens out of the 19th century. Because we're still, we're almost done on the 19th century. Talking about that entire history. And things gets very interesting in the 20th century. What happens when people tries to implement the critique, all of that, and I'm going to be discussing those things. And you can also say, and to really understand the critique of anarchism towards the Marxists is that if you centralize, the state cannot always respond properly to events. And there's something very, very important event that happens in the 20th century called the Holodomor. And the Great Famine, the Great Leap Forward. And we're going to discuss those things. Now I'm going to warn you right now, I'm not going to go into doing the same things that these are genocide. No. I am not going to make that kind of critique because that's not what happened. The things that they done right, there are things that were not good. And I'm going to discuss those things more in detail. So, after the Second International, this is where the Marxists decided, okay, I'm going to influence government in the Western world because they think that socialism will emerge in a wealthy country, in a first world. So they created all these social democrat parties across Europe. And these people use Marxist principle to develop theories. And they were going to be like, okay, we're going to try to influence the politics on how to do things. And a lot of their goal was about, we're going to try to, it was literally about, we're going to influence the politics and have the labor parties, and we're going to promote the works of what worker wants. The labor parties, the communist parties, they literally wanted to promote the ideas for the worker. In the 20th century, things start to change because social democrat, this is where I'm going to leave on a note, because at this point, as I said, they're broadly speaking, there's three major forces. You have the social democrat, the communist, and the anarchist. Yet I just talk about the social democrat and how they started to get involved in Western politics. The communist will emerge from from Lenin. Marxist-Leninist theories are the foundation of the communist theories. And I am going to discuss more in detail those things next time in my next video. Have a good day.